Okay, we will get started. Welcome to this week's Purdue at WestGate Webinar Series. My name is Samantha Nelson, and I'm the Program Manager for the Purdue Foundry WestGate here at the WestGate Academy. We at Purdue at WestGate strive to promote business and talent growth, and we want to help support you as a startup or small business. We strive to be that regional hub of connection and support. Purdue WestGate is located within the WestGate Academy. The WestGate Academy is a technology incubator training and office conference center that is located within the WestGate at Crane Technology Park, which is directly outside the gates of the Naval Support Activity Center in Crane, Indiana. We would like to thank our sponsor for this webinar, Elevate Ventures. Elevate is part venture capital fund and part entrepreneurial development partner. We partner with Elevate on a regular basis when supporting startups, so thank you to Elevate for their continued support. Today, we are excited to be hosting a webinar with John Lohman. I had the pleasure of connecting and meeting with John after one of our previous webinars. John is Partnerships Director with Near the Box. I'll let him provide you with some further insight on what a Partnership Director actually does, but I think you will enjoy John's passion in helping founders, incubators, accelerators, venture capitals, and others address the lack of technical partners who genuinely care about their long-term success. We ask that you mute your microphones, and if comfortable, you can leave your video on during the presentation. Either way is going to be good with us. Please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. We will answer those questions at the end of the presentation. This presentation and recording of the webinar will be available to you and be sent to you via email. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to John Lohman.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Like Samantha said, my name's John Lohman, and it's good to see some familiar faces out there. Hopefully, by now you've had a cup of coffee or two at this point, but I'm excited to share some insights this morning. So I'd like to zero in on a few main things that I want you to get out of this presentation, some key takeaways. Hopefully by the end, you will have learned when and how to select a technical partner. And I want to share some tools and some processes to try to prevent sour experiences from happening. You 100% don't need to be technical to work with technical people. But if you can get yourself to start thinking like a technical partner, you're much more likely to have a better experience and a better product in the end. And I should note that the founders of Pandora and Airbnb were not technical. So there's hope for all of us non-engineers. So with that said, let's get started. So a little bit about us. I work for a company called Near the Box. The company was founded in 2017, and it began as a one-man Fortune 500 consulting operation by Adi Gandra, our CEO, founder, and my former college roommate at IU. He has a computer science background and has been coding since he was like 11 or 12. And last year, as his business grew, he brought me on and he continued to build out our team of 6. And we started working with more startups. He's heavily involved with every founder that we work with. Now, my background is in project management and business development. I wear 2 hats. So I'm a product manager. So I bridge the founder and our internal team. And then I also work in a partnerships capacity. So I connect with fellow startup ecosystem folks throughout the Midwest, but particularly in Indiana and Michigan, where Adi and I live. Our mission's pretty simple. We work with founders to build digital products that make a difference in people's lives. And one thing we've observed is that there's a lack of technical partners who genuinely care about the long-term success of founders. So let's make sure we're talking with the same language here. So I want to cover a few important glossary terms. The first is a minimum viable product. So in Lean Startup, Eric Ries defines an MVP as the version of a new product that allows the team to collect a maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. I think this is a great definition, but I think he's missing one small piece, in that you're trying to create a product to get this learning with the least cost. Because as a startup founder, you're probably pretty lean on capital in the beginning. An MVP is a product version that gains traction in customers. Essentially, it should tell you what's working, what's not working, and what's missing. Now, the MVP won't be perfect. It'll be your ugly baby. And you'll want to make sure to focus on your core business model and forget about any unnecessary features and beautiful design. With an MVP, founders should ask themselves, what is the essence of my business? And if you need 100 features to launch your MVP, you've probably lost sight of your core business model. The next key definition is scope. And scope is the agreed upon features of the MVP by the founder and the technical partner. Scope will change throughout the process, but it's super important that you bullet out the key features that need to be there in the end. And finally, we have the proposal, or the SOW. And that's a formal agreement that includes what's in and out of scope, the financial arrangement, and the timeline. Now, make sure you compare, as a founder, your list of requirements to what you see in the proposal from the technical partner. Misinterpretation can happen, so you'll want to do a quick cross-reference. So now that we're speaking the same language, let's talk about how to find a technical partner and the 3 primary options. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Reliable technical talent can be harder to find than capital. I mean, you're looking for a true partner. So we actually recommend that you ask an advisor, mentor, or a startup accelerator lead. I should note, everyone in the Indiana startup ecosystem has been extremely friendly to me. I haven't met anyone with an accelerator or co-working space that hasn't been more than willing to help and answer questions. And I've found local resources in Indiana, G-Beta directors, the Purdue Foundry team, and Elevate Ventures EIRs. They all can really help and provide valuable input. And the odds are pretty high that there's a founder that's local. So referrals work best. Now, as you're comparing potential technical partners, you'll want to look at their portfolio, process, support, and the price. Now, I think the operative word on this bullet is portfolio. Finding an example in their portfolio that resembles your vision is a great way to mitigate risk when it comes to their capabilities. If they've done something similar in the past, the odds are greater that they'll be able to move quickly and effectively on your project. Although not the end-all be-all, I'd actually recommend that you look to see if they've built digital products in your industry. You might notice that they have experience in healthcare, finance, ag, sports, automotive. You know, it can be helpful if they have experience in your industry. So I want to break down, I'd say, the 3 main options you can go. And I should note that any of these 3 options can work. You just have to find the right person or the right team. And each one has its own positives and negatives. So let's start with the freelance developer route. This can be the most cost-effective route, and you can get the most value. However, it's the riskiest approach. Great, reliable freelancers can be hard to find. They'll likely be working on other projects at the same time too. You might need to know how much bandwidth they're gonna have on your specific project. And they might even have a day job. so they can't commit fully as far as their time. Then there's the CTO co-founder route. And I'm not gonna lie, this might be the best option of the three. You have someone that's also invested in your company and has skills and knowledge that you don't have. They can provide long-term strategy and might be able to do the development themselves. If you're going the overseas outsource route, they might be able to effectively manage those folks. However, on the flip side, you're stuck with the CTO potentially for a long time. It's a hard sell to convince an experienced CTO to leave a six-figure salary with benefits to work for a startup for maybe a quarter of their salary plus equity. That might not amount to anything. Plus, if they're committing to do the development themselves, they might not have the specific engineering skills that your product calls for. And if you don't have a prior relationship with this person, it's a challenge to find someone that you can trust to work as hard as you as a co-founder. Finally, there's the development firm route. And with this route, you're working with a team of talented individuals that can cover all functions needed to build your product. They should have experience building products and can help advise you on product market fit, cost benefit ROI analysis on features, product architecture and roadmap, security, and UX design. This will save you considerable time and money. Plus, they're least likely to drop your project or develop a faulty MVP because they have to be accountable with the reputation on the line. Plus, they're probably going to be faster. If you're looking to sprint and build an MVP in a short period of time, this might be the best option. However, a development firm might be the most expensive option of the three. So who is the ideal technical partner? And I should note that it can be a freelance developer, can be a CTO co-founder, or it could be a development company. So let's start with a quick definition. So a technical partner builds and iterates digital products with founders. They're an extension or formal member of the founding team. Now, I think there's an important differentiation that needs to be made here. There's a transaction-based dynamic or a relationship-based dynamic. And as a first-time founder, it can be hard to see the differences between the two as you're trying to pick a technical partner. So a transaction-based dynamic is task-oriented. So the service provider is going to do just what's in scope and build an MVP. And then once they're done with the scope, they're out the door. They're saying goodbye. Now, on the other hand, a relationship-based dynamic, what you're getting with an ideal or a true technical partner is someone that actually cares about your long-term success. The bottom line is you don't want someone that's going to blindly build what you tell them. I mean, you probably won't know how much a feature costs or how long building an additional feature will take. So there's a lot of value in having someone with experience that can help guide you and provide strategy to build for long-term success. So how does an ideal technical partner help you achieve long-term success? So that they shouldn't upsell you on features and design, right? I mentioned earlier that an MVP is your ugly baby. So it's not necessary to have beautiful design with your MVP. Now the next bullet is crucial. Are they flexible to dealing with scope changes as you get initial user feedback? The odds are super high that you're going to have to pivot as you're trying to build your MVP. And it's going to be a little different than your original vision. And that's perfectly okay. But your technical partner needs to be flexible. Thirdly, a true technical partner building for long-term success is going to avoid technical debt. And technical debt is when you build an MVP, but basically the code and framework of your MVP leads you to a dead end, right? You're not able to add additional features efficiently after the MVP if you're in technical debt. And then finally, I think non-technical founders are focused on building. They're focused on the short term and developing their MVP as soon as possible. And the target is achieving success. It's gaining customers, gaining early revenue, hopefully. But you need to think about it with a more long-term approach. And a development firm or a developer can help you transition to an in-house team. That's the goal. So now that we've touched on the 3 primary options and what an ideal technical partner looks like, let's discuss some common pain points. So you might find that your product isn't validated with customers. You're not sure what features should be prioritized. So hopefully a true technical partner is going to give you that cost-benefit perspective on each feature. You might find that requirements are not clearly defined and documented. So you're looking to mitigate risks throughout the project. And one way to avoid this is to make sure that you're effectively documenting everything. A founder will need a detailed account from the technical partner on how everything is set up and how everything works. So that worst case scenario, someone could step in and not have to recreate the wheel. Another common problem is you get to the finish line, and as a founder, features don't work as you expected. The last thing you want is to be 3 or 4 months in, and you get to the finish line, and everything's working incorrectly, and you just feel underwhelmed. This is why it's super pivotal that you're able to play around and test early prototypes, as opposed to being in a silo until the end of the project. Another common pain point is you feel like there's poor communication when timelines are constantly shifting and you're missing deadlines. Now, I should say estimating timelines for big projects is challenging, even for experienced technical partners. But missing deadlines hurts everyone. So we recommend that you have proactive and solutions-oriented communication that can reduce the impact of timeline issues if they pop up. What if something goes wrong? Are you supported? Your technical partner needs to be there when you notice a bug after business hours, right before customer testing. Are they going to be there when something unexpectedly goes wrong during an investor demo with your MVP? You need to be supported at all times, and that messaging needs to be there as you're evaluating a technical partner. So we've talked about some common pain points. Next, I want to talk about how to get off to the right start with your technical partner. You can minimize scope changes and overall costs by understanding and considering these items before meeting a potential technical partner. A relationship-based technical partner will want you to have considered these things before encouraging to build a full MVP that you can launch with. A lot of these things are key elements in the pitch deck, so I won't go into super great detail on these, but I'll touch on them. So you'll want to have a feel for your current team and what the roles and responsibilities are of each team member. You'll want to have a good grip on the problem and the solution and the value proposition that your product and company solve for. You'll want to know the market size and the competitive landscape. And then you'll want to know how you're going to make revenue. How's this product going to make money for you? And you'll want to have a marketing plan in place. Now, I want to zero in on this last bullet here. The founder has demonstrated initial validation. So this is super important because you shouldn't be shooting in the dark when you start building an MVP. So when you are proving that initial validation, you're showing everyone that you have a willingness to take initiative, and it confirms your value proposition. You're proving that the problem is significant enough for a customer to pay for a solution. And without initial traction, you won't know if it's worth the money, time, and energy to embark on building an MVP. So what does confirming your value proposition look like from the vantage point of a technical partner? So this can look like creating a landing page, inviting select customers to try prototypes, pre-order the MVP, or get important news updates. It can look like a well-executed market survey or A/B testing. It can look like the manual execution of your business idea without the platform, also known as a concierge MVP. Or, and one thing we like to see at Near the Box, is leveraging Bubble or Adalo as a no-code, low-code way of essentially building a pre-MVP version before tapping a technical partner to build a full-fledged MVP. So we talked about common pain points. We mentioned earlier that founders find that features aren't working the way that they expected them to. So I want to talk about requirements that can help make sure your vision is realized and that expectations are met or exceeded. Our requirements at Near the Box aren't universal to all technical partners, but they've been effective in maintaining clarity between founders and our technical team. Often what you think you're saying to a developer, they might be understanding you very differently. So requirements are our tools that help bridge the expectation gap and communication gap that can often exist. So our definition of requirements are the essential items needed to ensure that the technical partner and founder are on the same page during development. Requirements give everyone a universal source of truth to avoid disagreements on scope, particularly as you approach the finish line. Now, I touched on scope earlier. The scope list is the list of required items or features with your MVP. But I'm going to go into detail a little bit on user stories and wireframes. But I just want to qualify that a scope list, user stories, and wireframes, they can be done by or with your technical partner. But at Near the Box, if we find that if you're a founder of a super early stage company, you should be the ones defining at least the initial vision of the product. And if you start thinking about your product in terms of these requirements, it's going to allow you and your technical partner to build a better MVP and take some of the guessing out. Typically, after the initial version of these items is complete, your technical partner should work with you to refine and expand on them and think of any edge cases. But by doing the initial work, you make sure that your vision is the one that's being followed, not the technical partner's vision. So let's first talk about user stories. So creating a user story chart is a great place to start because it forces the founder to think through the different types of customers and how their journey on the platform may change based on certain decisions or criteria. User stories illustrate the different scenarios a user can take and shows the expected outcomes of those scenarios. So we have an HR portal example here with our user story chart. And you can see that the column headings are important. So you have two groups of users for this HR portal. You have the employee and you have the HR rep. So the conditional column basically will show the condition or status of that group of user. And then you have the I want column, which is important. It basically it basically shows how that user will want to be notified or have certain access to a page on the MVP. And then the so that column is really the desired end result or action. So let's dive into wireframes too. So when it comes to wireframes, we ask founders to take a pen to paper or use a site like Whimsical or Adobe XD to just do basic programming or diagramming on what they think the site should look like. Some questions to ask as you're making your initial wireframe is, what are the core elements that I want in my MVP? What are the key pages that the platform will need, and how will they work? And I want to reiterate that no branding, color, or design is needed on these wireframes. Sometimes even just drawing something on paper is a good start. So I have two examples of wireframes here on this slide. The left version is what we think like a version of wireframes, what a founder can do on their own before working with the technical partner. On the right side, you see a more fleshed out wireframe, and typically this is where you'll be once you've started working with your technical partner. At this point, you're annotating how all of the core elements are going to work and kind of what the functionality is on the page. So I just touched on requirements, talking about the scope list, the user story chart, and wireframes. Now, I want to talk through communication expectations, because communication can be a common alignment problem when trying to hit deadlines. And so here are some basic guidelines to help be on the same page. So you're going to need a direct contact that knows your product and requirements. It can't be just some random person working at an IT help desk. You will depend on this person for quick responses, and they need to know your product. You'll want to establish who the founding team reviewers are and ensure that the project is parallel processing. So by parallel processing, at Near the Box, we talk a lot about working asynchronously. I mean, the odds are pretty high that you're trying to get to the finish line of building the right MVP as soon as possible. So if there's ways to eliminate inaction or waiting or unnecessary dependencies, we recommend that you think about that strategically. We're also super big on make sure that you can test and experiment with your own product as much as possible, as soon as possible. This is crucial because technical partners are looking for real-time feedback, and true technical partners should want to build the right thing too. Next, we recommend having bi-weekly meetings with your technical partner on the latest project updates. And finally, we recommend having bi-monthly checkpoints along the way to make sure that everyone's tracking the overall timeline and that all parties are clear on documented scope changes. So the next few slides are some questions that I think would be helpful to have in your back pocket as you're assessing a technical partner. So I mentioned the portfolio piece earlier, but you'll want to have them walk you through relevant case studies. Then I even recommend that they send you a list of at least a few references, and I would call those references and get a sense for the experience that those folks had, and to see if the technical partner was actually able to hit deadlines. You'll want to ask, what tech stack do you plan to use for this project? Now, as a non-technical founder, It doesn't really matter what tech stack they ultimately choose. They just need to be competent and experienced on the determined stack. You'll want to ask, what are your plans for the platform security? This is vital. Customer information needs to be protected. That's a minimum standard. Who will be my chief point of contact? How will I be supported throughout the project? So I touched on that earlier. You'll need to be supported at all times. How many projects do you take on per year? So with this question, you're hoping to assess how invested they're going to be in your startup. If they seem to have a small team, but they work on a ton of projects, that could be problematic for you. Do you use a project management tool for me to track status of the work? So a couple examples of this are asana.com or monday.com. And these are great tools to help you stay organized. You'll also want to ask, what is your software development methodology? And agile methodology is really the biggest one here. And that'll allow you and your technical partner to prioritize sprint on features and to be communicating effectively and often throughout the project. Will you and your team perform testing? So a little context on this one. Being the founder, you're going to notice things that your technical partner might not. You're going to have those microscopic eyes pointing out, small bugs here and there that need to be fixed. But when you're reviewing a prototype or close to the final MVP, there shouldn't be 47 bugs. Because if there is, it's obvious that your technical partner isn't doing any sort of testing or quality assurance. With our group, Adi and I both jump in and do a lot of testing. The next question is, will you create necessary documentation during the coding process? So documentation is key. If you ever need to transition the project, proper documentation ensures that this is done efficiently. As we grow, will you help us create a job description to hire and onboard an engineer in-house? So I touched on this earlier. Typically, a developer or a development company, if you're experiencing success, it makes sense to have an in-house team. So try to get a sense if they're thinking about the long-term perspective here, and if they'll help with hopefully that eventual transition. And then I recommend that you ask if any part of the work is going to be outsourced overseas, because you're trying to understand if in the 11th hour changes need to be made, like who will be able to make those changes? Someone online that's technical, an engineer, will need to make those changes, and it might not be the person that you're used to communicating with. And finally, outside of the bullets here, these are two of maybe the most important questions. Do they understand your business model, right? They're technical, they have an engineering background, but they might not have a business background. So you're trying to get a sense as you're telling them what you're looking for them to do and what your vision is, if they get it. Do they understand, who your target customer is and what that experience should be on your product? So try to get a feel for that. And then finally, though this question's a little more informal, would you want to get a beer with them after working a 14-hour day? And this ties into that relationship-based dynamic versus transaction-based dynamic. A relationship-based dynamic, like you're going to want to hang out with them. You find yourself enjoying the experience of working with them. And when you're grinding and there's bags under your eyes and everyone's exhausted, you'll still look at them positively. So you'll try to want to get that sense too. So you have a questionnaire in your back pocket. Let's talk about a financial arrangement. And this is my final slide. So make sure there is a provision to rapidly prototype. You might find halfway through that a feature included in scope isn't as useful as a feature that was left out. It may be worth asking the technical partner if they're open to being a co-founder and taking a percentage of equity to offset the overall cost of building the MVP. This might be beneficial to the founder if capital is low, and it might raise the urgency of your technical partner. Now, financial arrangements can be creative based on project specs, vision, and founder's capital. So it can be fee-based, so it can be flat fee, or it can be based on hours, or it can be a mixture of fee or a monthly retainer and equity. So there's less risk with going for a flat fee build out. We recommend that you start out with that. And a true technical partner should break out the fixed cost along the life cycle of the project, because it doesn't make sense to spend a bunch of money upfront with no tangible product. Ultimately, you might move to an hourly rate for support or new feature build out, or if there's major scope changes. So I want to give a special shout out to Megan Lohman at Plan Forward and Stephanie Corliss at Snapshift for giving me the founder perspective on these slides. And I'll kick it over to Samantha for some Q&A.
Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat function as of yet, John. So it sounds like you might have answered everyone's questions ahead of time. So must have been it was a good presentation. So they apparently learned more than they had questions on. So, but we appreciate you doing this, John, being on this webinar. We want to thank Elevate Ventures for being the sponsor. I'm sure John would be more than happy for you to contact him with any further questions that you might have. As mentioned, a copy of the presentation and recording of this webinar will be sent to you via email, or it is on our YouTube channel if you go to the WestGate Academy YouTube page. So again, we want to thank Elevate Ventures for sponsoring, and make sure you check out the WestGate Academy website, www.westgate-academy.com. You can learn more about how we can support you, whether it be co-working space, conference, or office space, or even help with just cultivating your idea with your startup. You can also check it out just to see other future events that we'll be having. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we look forward to potentially meeting all of you in an in-person event sometime in the near future. So everyone have a safe week, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you, John.
No problem.